Good morning, good morning. All right. Let's rock and roll. Before we get started, I've been asked to let you know that the cookbooks are, excuse me, the cookbooks are in, and some people have paid for them but not picked them up. So if you haven't picked up your cookbook that you paid for, or if you don't remember if you bought one or not, that also happens.
He has his own stash.
Yeah, I got my own secret stash of these.
Oh, is that what you stole last week?
Stole? No, yes, these are the ones that I took the rest of them. No, I did not. These won't even make it home. Oh, yeah. Then we'll have enough. We'll get there. Let's look at the Gospel of John, chapter 19. The Lord be with you. Let's pray. Lord, keep us steadfast in your word. Curb those who by deceit or sword would wrest the kingdom from your Son and bring to naught all he has done. Amen. All right, John 19, verse 25. Okay, I want to talk about Jesus' mother today. And one of the things that I was looking at is the Gospel of John, since I'm particularly interested in that gospel, so you're just going to suffer the things that I was interested in this week. John 19, verse 23, when the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and divided them into 4 parts, 1 part for each soldier. Also his tunic, that the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom, so they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see whose it shall be." This was to fill the scriptures, which says, "They divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." So the soldiers did these things. Interestingly, and I think it's Leviticus 21, 22, something like that, there's a command of the Levites to not marry an unclean woman, that is a prostitute or a non-virgin, and to not defile themselves with much drink, and not to tear their garments. So there's some sort of symbolical meaning behind Jesus' seamless one-piece garment and not tearing it vis-a-vis the priesthood of the Old Covenant. But that's another sermon for another day. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Okay, this might be boring for some of you, but grammatically, it's technically possible to say that Mary, his mother's sister, and then the appositive is Mary, the wife of Clopas, meaning Mary's sister's name was Mary, and she was married to Clopas, and then Mary Magdalene. So you've just got the 3 Marys there. Now, it's unlikely that Mary's sister's name was Mary, unless their father was George Foreman. You know, he names all of his kids George. They all just have different names. So there's probably these 4 women here, and then there's some mystery over who his mother's sister is. Now, let's look at Luke. Just put your finger there and just glance at the crucifixion narrative in Luke. 23, verse 49. You've got all of his acquaintances, and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching these things. So in John, you have there all these women are standing next to the cross, but then over there they're standing at a distance. Those aren't contradictory, believe it or not. So you can stand at a distance and then later stand up close. So if somebody tries to say, well, Luke says they're off at a distance and John is right next to you there, it never happened because they couldn't even get their story straight. Well, there's these things called feet. And if you are standing here, I am standing at a distance from that door. And then, later on, I can walk and stand right next to the door. So just remember that. Then you have in chapter 24, it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James, and the other with them who told these things to the apostles. So it could very well be that you've got Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Joanna. So if you confer that with, I know you can already feel you're falling asleep. Confer that with John chapter 19, where you have Mary, the mother, Jesus' mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Then his mother's sister could be Joanna. Could be Joanna. And that Joanna, but it's probably not the sister of Mary, because if you look earlier in Luke, it says that Joanna, one of the stewards in Herod's house, was one of the women who followed Jesus and supplied his needs. She was like a financial backer. So Joanna was one of these women that kind of followed him around. Okay, now look at Mark. We're almost there. We're almost done. I just thought this was interesting. So Mark 15. Verse 40, there were also women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the younger and of Joseph, and Salome. Who's Salome? What? Yeah, probably not the dancer. Yeah, Herod's stepdaughter. Probably not her. It was probably a more common name. Salome, maybe, was Mary's sister. Who's Salome then? Mary, the mother of James, the younger, and of Joseph. This is somebody else. Okay, look at Matthew. Isn't this fun? This is what scholars do. They study all this stuff, and then they say, wow, that's very interesting. And everyone else in the world goes, who cares? You'll find out in a minute why it would matter. Might matter. Probably doesn't matter, but it might. It would certainly make sense. Matthew 27:55, there are also many women there looking on from a distance who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. So who's Salome? Maybe. Maybe. Could have been Zebedee's wife. Salome also, maybe, could have been Mary's sister. Maybe James and John's mother is Mary. I don't know. If you're gonna fake a story and try to perpetuate some grand conspiracy, maybe don't name every main character Mary. I mean, it's just kind of laughable. Okay, now let's get to John 19 back there. I took you through that dark and twisted tunnel for this purpose, to say that we know that Jesus' aunt was at the cross. It is possible to infer that his aunt was the mother of James and John, the wife of Zebedee. Okay? Meaning, the disciple whom Jesus loved in the Gospel of John is also the cousin of Jesus. It's possible. All right? Why might that matter? 19, verse where am I? Verse 25. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. Okay, what's that?
Was that woman the woman who asked Jesus to put her son's next to him in heaven?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. The question was, is that the same woman, the mother of James and John, the one that asked Jesus, the wife of Zebedee, who asked Jesus, "Do me a favor, put my sons, one on your right hand and one on your left," right? It would seem a bit incredulous. So I think that supports the idea that maybe it was his aunt, because it would otherwise seem a little incredulous and a little like, who the heck do you think you are that you want to ask that? Okay, now here's another idea. Why would Jesus say, "Hey, John, can you take care of my mom?" Why him more than anybody else? Well, perhaps they're related. Okay, again, this is all conjecture. What difference does it make to the theological narrative if this point right here is simply just taking care of things, like, okay, now I've set all my affairs in order, my house is in order, and then the next paragraph he says, "It is finished," and bowed his head and gave up his spirit. That would seem to be sort of a symbolic orphan in the text that is rife with imagery and with deep, rich meaning beyond just what is literally written in the text. Instead, okay, so get my thoughts straight here. I'll ask you while I eat another one of these things. Why would Jesus do that? What are some possibilities of him saying that? Seeing his mother and seeing John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, who is John, say, "Behold your mother, behold your son." There's a couple possibilities. I'll just write. I'll eat that later, yeah.
In Old Testament times, the women needed everything.
Yeah, so it's just like to take care of his mom, okay? So you got possibility number one, someone to take care of Mary. Okay, now, let me make that even more complicated, as if it weren't already. If Jesus has lots of brothers and sisters, why would he need to do that with John? Unless he actually was the only child, in which case Mary is ever Virgin Mary. You see how the house of cards is built? So you can believe that or not, but I think the plain meaning of the text elsewhere is the easiest one. So when it says James is the brother of Jesus, I think he was the brother of Jesus, because he doesn't, like, "You are all my friends, he is our brother." Yeah, but if his title is brother of Jesus, that would kind of distinguish him from the rest of the apostles and the rest of the servants of the church. Yeah. Brother from a different mother. No, I think James, the bishop of Jerusalem, I think his mother was Mary. I think the plainest explanation in the text and the tradition is that. So it must not just be to take care of Mary. Now think more broadly and symbolically. Did you know? Yeah, John is known as the one whom Jesus loved. Why does he call himself that instead of, like he does later, "I, John, wrote these things," like in Revelation? "I, John, saw these things and wrote these things down," he says in Revelation. But in the Gospel of John, he just says the one whom Jesus loved. He sort of hides his identity. Why would he do that? "These things are written that you may believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God." And so you can place yourself in the narrative. The biblical text takes over your life. You don't go, "Well, let's see what can I use Jesus for today? What part can I apply my life to?" Now, the Gospel of John, and indeed all of Scripture, says, "Here's the story. Would you like to be in it?" You get in it. You don't take it and use it for your own life and kind of fit Jesus to it. He fits you into his life. It's something a lot of people don't really understand. How can I use Jesus to make sense of my life? That's backwards. Jesus uses you to make sense of his story. You're the one who gets fit into the grand narrative. And so you are finding your way through this story. And it's kind of like what we talked about in the sermon today, that when we remember the saints, we give thanksgiving to God, we are strengthened in our faith, and we imitate their godliness. We give thanksgiving to God for their part that they played in the story of God's salvation. Just like in the book of Hebrews, you got this great cloud of witnesses, just a list of all of these great saints that went before us. Why would he do that? Well, to give thanks to God and to strengthen our faith, and so that we can imitate their godliness. It's as simple as that. So, hey, look at all these saints. What can we learn from that? Well, let's do this. That's why we name our churches after saints, except Mary. You won't find a St. Mary Lutheran church. Ironically, St. Mary's Cathedral was, I think, the one that Luther nailed the 95 Thesis to. John, you look like you have a question. It's only in the Gospel of John, which he wrote.
So he's saying, this guy really loved me.
He really loved me. Yeah. Is it more than that?
Is there more than that?
Yeah.
Is it,
I think there is more than that.
so he doesn't put himself on the same platform as Jesus? I mean, I don't know. Close, but I'm not there.
Well, these are things to sit in the dark and ponder. I think John calls himself the one whom Jesus has loved. So, okay, so there's some background prerequisites that we have to have first. First, John, in history, it is commonly accepted in church antiquity that John, having seen the first three Gospels and approved of them, being the last apostle alive, because in fact, Jesus says at the end, what about him? Says Peter, and he says, if I want him to live forever, what's it to you? And thus started the rumor that the disciple will live forever, but he did not say if he will live forever. He just said, what's it to you, kind of a thing. And that's in John chapter 21. So John has these like personal examples in there. It's indisputable that it is John. So anyway, he's the last one alive. He's the last sort of gatekeeper of orthodoxy in the church. And he writes Revelation, and then he writes the epistles, and in this order, number 2, number 3, then number 1. And then he writes the Gospel of John to finish up his life. So Eusebius, the church historian, says, having seen the first three Gospel and approved of them, he set out to write his fourth, a more spiritual Gospel, which is why you won't find a direct institution of any sacraments in the Gospel of John. But you absolutely will find the sacraments in the Gospel of John, like chapter 6, whoever doesn't eat my flesh and drink my blood, like that. Baptism imagery is all over the place too. It's all about the witness. It's all about the message. It's all about the proclamation of the gospel. And John wrote this just inundated with symbolism and meaning, and invites you to his main purpose, which is in chapter 21. Jesus did many other signs that were not written in this book, but these things are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, and by believing may have life in his name. So if you confer like his epistles, he's more direct about his witness, that which we have seen, that which we have heard, that which we have known from the beginning, which we have touched. This we now declare to you, so that you may be in us. So we have this message. I'm going to call myself the one whom Jesus loved, so that I can invite you to be the one whom Jesus loved. That make sense? I think that's the skip that we wanted to make, that hop, skip, and a jump. So if John, the one whom Jesus loved, is you, then the other characters may have some other deeper theological or spiritual meaning as well, in addition to this literally happening. Two things can be true at once. Something can literally happen, and I can say it in such a way that it draws you into a spiritual contemplation.
The entire Bible is all about the message.
Yeah, the grand meta-narrative of the Bible is the story of salvation. This is how God saves his people. That's why the Lutheran Study Bible there, the very beginning says, where you write your name, says the story of the salvation of blank, and that's where you write your name on it. Did you ever notice that? Did you write your name in it? See? What do you notice about the mother of Jesus? Okay, this is a good trivia. What's Jesus' mother's name? Mary. If you only had the Gospel of John, would you know that? Where, in 1925? It just says his mother. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister. How many other times in the Gospel of John does the mother of Jesus show up? That's chapter 2 is when he shows up. What's happening in chapter 2? Yeah, that's the wedding at Cana. 2 verse 1, the mother of Jesus was there. Her name isn't mentioned. So this is another weird thing. You would assume if the readers didn't know these women that they would be named, or there's some deeper spiritual meaning behind them, and they're deliberately not named, like the one whom Jesus loved, to draw you into a further spiritual contemplation of what's happening. So you have Jesus, you have the mother of Jesus at the wedding at Cana, and then you have the mother of Jesus standing at the cross, and two different things happen there, but they're linked uniquely. And we'll get to that in a second. Is everybody lost yet? Okay, look at the third epistle of John. John is really full, or second epistle of John. Yes, yeah. This is the guy that wrote the book of Revelation, right? I mean, that witnessed the revelation. Yeah, miss.
So if John doesn't mention himself by name, and he
Yeah.
doesn't mention Mary by name, does that give more credibility that John really is his brother in real life? And
I would,
doesn't mention family names
because everybody knows who they are.
family is more important than our
Yeah.
earthly family.
Yes, that's exactly where I'm going right now. The comment was if he doesn't mention, it lends more credibility to the fact that John is not, good work. Would you like a treat? That again lends more credibility to the fact that I just realized how offensive that sounded. I'm sorry. That John is like a relative of Jesus, in that the fact that he doesn't name himself, and that emphasizing more that the family of Jesus Christ, the spiritual family, is more important than the flesh and blood family. Yes, 100%. And I've been saying this for years. Blood is not thicker than water. You have that phrase like blood's thicker than water, so family means everything. Okay, I understand the sentiment, but spiritually speaking, it's not true. Families will be divided on the day of the judgment if some people of the family have rejected Jesus. Period. End of story. The water of holy baptism is thicker than the blood of your second cousin once removed, or whatever it is. Okay, so the second letter of John, listen to this. The elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in the truth, and not only I, but also all who know the truth, because the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. Who's the elect lady? Mary or the mother of Jesus? Who's he writing to? John isn't writing a letter to Mary. He's writing it to the church, the elect lady and her children. Who is the elect in Scripture but the church? Okay, so maybe a deeper spiritual meaning has something to do, take care of Mary, has something to do with the church being taken care of. Where's my marker? We've gotten there eventually. Take care of the church. So if the beloved disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, if you love me, you will keep my commands, and my truth will be in you, be in the truth. We who have seen him, heard him, touched him, listened to him, digested all of his truth, we now give you this so that your hope is made complete in us. It is possible then to enter into a spiritual contemplation about what's happening in this real-life conversation between Jesus and John and Mary, to place yourself in the position underneath the authority of the ones who are tasked with the job of taking care of you, namely the apostolic witness of Jesus Christ. Therefore, is there any salvation outside of the church? No. That doesn't mean, is there any salvation if you outside of going to 8 o'clock every Sunday? It's different. The church, in the spiritual sense, is all saints living and dead who have been washed and redeemed and believe in Jesus Christ. All those who cling to the promise of salvation in Jesus is the church. So to say, is there salvation outside of the church, is the exact same sentence as saying, can you be saved if you don't believe in Jesus? And the answer is no, right? So it shouldn't be offensive at all to say there's no salvation outside of the church. Now, when Rome says it, they mean salvation outside of the authority of the Pope and that hierarchy. That's not what is ever meant by it. They developed that over time and through political abuse. So if you are the elect lady, you're being cared for by the disciple whom Jesus loved, who saw, heard, touched, et cetera, et cetera. We know his testimony is true, and these things are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, and by believing may have life in his name. Look at another passage. That ice maker is loud. It's celebrating. Hooray! It sounds like applause. It's a lot of ice. Okay, look at Revelation. Chapter 12. Revelation 12. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. Who might that be? Just think symbolically. 12, anytime you see 12, what are you thinking? Yeah, tribes of Israel, and then the fulfillment is the apostles. So the completion of the elders of the church. So the throne, the 12 stars, right? You also have the end of Daniel talking about they will shine like stars, right? So this apocalyptic imagery of that which reflects the light, now that we know more about science, that which shines upon the darkness, and like the heavenly bodies which reflect the light of the sun, and we could say sun with a capital S and an O. But that's, again, another sermon. A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains. Keep your finger right there. Or just listen. John 16, up in the upper room. Truly, truly, I say to you, you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. You will be sorrowful when your sorrow will turn into joy. When a woman is giving birth, she has sorrow because her hour has come. But when she has delivered the baby, she no longer remembers the anguish for joy that a human being has brought into the world. So also you have sorrow now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you. Okay, back to Revelation. She was pregnant. She was pregnant and crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. Who's the pregnant lady in this passage? The church. Yeah, it got to be layered meanings too, because a lot of people have read this pregnant lady as the pregnant lady, Mary. Especially as we continue, the dragon tries to get her. Some people have said the dragon is Herod. Herod tries to kill Jesus after the king is born in Bethlehem, but she flees to a desolate place for 1,260 days. So that's how long they were in Egypt, then came back. You can do that. You can also, looking at all of Johannine literature together, all of John's writings, you can also say that the next layer of meaning is that the pregnant lady is the church, crying out in birth pains the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. Then the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Okay, and this, who might the serpent be? Well, the serpent's the serpent, but who might the children of the pregnant lady be? Remember Jesus' words about the pregnant lady. You are in anguish, and then you will see me, and then the hour will have come. The children of the pregnant elect lady is, it's more church. So the devil is waiting for Christians to be born that he might devour them. Right? So this is all spiritual, waiting for spiritual children so that he might destroy them. All the more reason why we need to care for the children of our school, and this is why it's always been our emphasis to have Lutheran education. Because I just told somebody a couple weeks ago, this is just a little aside, reminiscences. A couple weeks ago I just told somebody, I don't care if the greatest public school in the entire world is a mile away from my house and is perfectly free. If they will not teach my kids how to be disciples of Jesus, I don't care. I don't care if they grow up to be lawyers or doctors or other rich people or Supreme Court justices. That'd be great. Yeah, sure. If that's the chosen line of work, yeah, they can do that if they want. I don't care if they're the smartest, richest, most successful. I don't care if I'm raising the next Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. If they don't know Jesus, it doesn't matter. And I'm not taking my chance. So, anyway. This is an example. Maybe you remember this. I was kind of new here, and people are still kind of getting used to me. And this statement kind of like slingshotted back to me. I said in a sermon in support of Lutheran schools, I said, well, we're all beacons of hope and faith, right? Like big spotlights. You can't put us out if a little water gets on, it's fine. The challenge to our faith or whatever. Our children are like tiny little matchsticks with a little bit of flame. And our job is to fan that flame into something, it only takes a spark, right? It's to something that's good and strong and undying, right? Why would you take that little flame that you've been given and throw it in a toilet? And that's what you do when you send your kids to a public school. So, I'm just saying, that hyperbolic example kind of slingshotted back to me. I had to have a conversation with somebody and tell them, oh, God bless you for teaching in the public school because we need godly people. And they're like, oh, okay, that's what you meant. I said, no, I'm not saying that everybody who goes. But I went to public school, and I know how it is. And it was a miracle by the time I finished high school that I was even still a Christian. It's by the grace of God alone. Yeah, Tom. Well, that was a digression. I don't want to get down that rabbit hole. Well, we have those funds. Yeah. We those exist. Nobody has ever been turned away because of money.
No, but I'm just saying, we can do that within our own families.
Yeah, we have it with our own church too. But anyway, I digress. That was sorry for that. I just had to say it. She gave birth to a male child. Oh, it's not. Yeah, never mind. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she is a place prepared by God, in which she's to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now, it looks like those symbolic meanings are competing against each other now. So now it looks like there is some other ruler, or maybe there's an antichrist thing going on here, or maybe it is Mary and she's talking about Jesus. Again, with like the stepped, layered symbolism of Revelation, it invites you into a spiritual contemplation about what has been before and what is happening now and what may happen in the future. And again, 2, sometimes even 3 or 4 things can be true at once, and different applications of these signs and symbols are valid in different contexts. Suffice to say that a large part of the history of interpretation of John 19, woman, behold your son, and John 16, the pregnant woman whose hour has come, has been linked to Revelation 12, where there is this pregnant woman crying out in the pains of birth, and so it is the church. Is this making sense, or am I confusing you even more? Yeah, that's all right. So, yeah, it makes sense, and I'm confused. Those are the 2 things that are true at once. Yeah. Okay, well, let's go back to John then, and I'll point out one more interesting factoid. I want to be clear. I don't think you're failing as a parent if you don't send your kid to a Christian school. I just want to say that they cannot and will not and are not designed to teach your children to be disciples of Jesus. And I'm also recognize the fact that not all Lutheran schools are created equal. And I have friends and colleagues who, a good friend of mine went to Lutheran schools up through a certain age, and he was, the dynamics of the classmates and the administration and whatever, it was killing his faith. And then he went to a public school and did something else. The point of what all of that hyperbole that I said is that if you're looking at a mission and a goal and a focus, you look at the mission and goal and focus of what somebody is trying to do. And the fact is, a Lutheran school, a Christian school's goal should be, number 1, to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Number 2, if we have time, we'll teach you how to read and write and science and all that good stuff, right? Whereas the public school simply has a different goal. And I, as a parent, do not have that prioritization. So I find a place that meets my prioritizations as a parent, and that's where I send my kids, okay? So, sorry. Sorry, not sorry, you understand what I mean now. Yeah, Karen.
Well, if we could take that analogy with what you said about the church, that same analogy, I think
What, the match with the fire?
the analogy with,
Oh, the pregnant lady?
no, with the,
Why don't you just,
with the message,
go ahead.
with the purpose of Christian education and the purpose of the church.
Mm-hmm.
With our young people today, I think the reason many young people today have an issue with the church is because the church is often seen as an institution, like school is often seen as an institution,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the church's mission is a message, like the school in public schools' mission is to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So in that parallel, I know young people who don't want to go to church because it's an institution, rather than seeing it as a way to build their faith. Do you see my message? Do you see my point?
Yeah, I see your point.
So I know, and you know, that church's mission is faith. However,
It
that is often not what church's message is.
or certainly not the feel.
Institution.
Right.
So many young people, young group people today don't want to have anything to do with church because they see it as institution, and so the two get mixed.
Yeah.
So let's parallel that.
Well, hold on. Let me catch them up first. The people watching online. The comment had to do with a lot of younger people not wanting to go to church because they see a connectivity between the institution of school and the institution of church, or at least the feeling or perception, rather than the focus of the church being the message of salvation and the hope that is given there. They just see another stand-up, sit-down set of rules, right? Did I capture that well? Okay, so then keep going. You said let's...
So let's go back to the schools. I think
Yeah.
as a country, we as Christians can go through our boat and get that school to education rather than all the other peripheral stuff that is taught. And in our churches, go back to the message of the gospel.
Yeah.
Both of those priorities need to happen so that in school, children actually learn, and in the church, people, young people, old people, all people will gravitate to the gospel.
They experience the hope.
It will be the main thing.
It's the main thing, and it's the only place you find it, right? So that makes me think about, yeah, the rest of the comment had to do with differentiating between the two, right? Getting rid of all the peripheral stuff. So I think this is what there was a who's the author? I can't remember his name, but there was a book that talked about this. Like, it used to be that the culture in general, society and culture in general was more or less lockstep with churchly morals for a long time. You know, probably when, post-war, kind of up until Woodstock or whatever, just for instance. And so it was often indistinguishable. You have like American morals, and then you have the church morals, and they were more or less the same. You have your Leave It to Beavers, your nuclear family, your kind of whatever. Now, I'm not saying that Leave It to Beaver is like, this is the biblical example, right? But what I am saying is that the more and more society as a whole shifted more towards a postmodernism or post-postmodernism worldview and started allowing more different worldviews and alternative lifestyles, et cetera, the more the church tried to overreact and overcompensate and inadvertently connected the God of the church to the God of America because they saw their countrymen going away from the church. And so when somebody tries to say, connect, wrap the cross in a flag, that's what's happening, and there's a confusion there. So when it comes to, say, public schools, you had the same thing. You had more or less kind of an equal lockstep thing. You're being raised in the church by your family, and then most of your teachers were probably, because they're teachers, they were probably concerned, moral people who most of whom went to church. I mean, I remember I had a couple of teachers I had one teacher that I went to church one time and saw my teacher there. I'm like, oh, that's weird. I didn't know she went, that kind of a thing. All my elementary school teachers, I had when I was in elementary school in the early 90s, all of my teachers were like nearing retirement age, all of them. So what kind of education did I get in elementary school? I got a very similar education that somebody got in the 1960s, to be honest. And the building was that old too. And so, so I had a great elementary school education. Every single one of my teachers was very moral, upright, Christian, old school teacher. It's not the case anymore. So society and culture has shifted over in worldviews and expectations and goals, and the church hasn't. So simply throwing out something like, well, I went to public school and I turned out fine. Good for you. That's like my grandpa saying, I smoked cigarettes for 30 years and ate bacon every day and lived to be 89. Good for you. Still wouldn't recommend that,
I think that's why a lot of times, like, our parents had a hard time when we were, like, my mom, for example, like, I went to a public school, but, like, we prayed in school, we sang Christian songs.
Yeah.
But, like, now me making a different decision than her was hard for her.
Oh, sure.
She thought I was judging
Right.
choices where we're living in a different world.
Right.
Our kids are growing up in a different
It's a totally different world. Yeah.
Made a different choice, and I had to explain that to her. Like, you didn't make, like, well, she could have made a different choice, by sending me to a private school. But like, I'm not judging her for the choice that she made. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that she's less than,
It's a different time. It's an absolute different time.
I started out at public school, and I was happy with the education all
Yeah.
around. But something that resonated with me is one night we were doing bedtime routine. Mama, can I always go to a school where my teachers pray with us? And I'm like, as long as I can help it.
Yes, you can.
As long as I can.
but that
and I
used
can
to
help
be
it.
able to happen when we were.
But that is,
younger.
it's
Yeah, you
totally
can't do that
different. They
anymore.
don't do the pledge, like
Yeah.
on, is it Friday, where in the gym, like the Pledge of Allegiance? Public school doesn't do that.
They don't do it anymore, no.
Or even, the pledge to the Christian flag, like,
Yeah.
But our teachers were all the same as yours. They were nearing retirement
Yeah.
when we were.
I mean, my kindergarten,
Hey, that was a great generation.
but nowadays it's just not like that.
No, it's simply different. I think wisdom is made perfect by your children. And so it's hard for parents. What you said resonated. It's hard for a parent to look and see that your kid is making a different decision. It's hard not to feel like, whoa, what did I do that was so wrong, right? But it's not the case. There's not a different layer of respect. There's some things that never change. The things that never change are the gospel, Christian values, morals, which is really just the fruits of the Spirit. That's all we're saying. Christian morals and values are the fruits of the Spirit. It just so happens that nowadays, generalized American values don't line up with the Bibles anymore. And so it's just changed. And so therefore, Christian attitudes toward the world has to change and adapt with it. This is always the interaction between Christ and culture. When it was lockstep, it was easier. And now, but you take it for granted, and then the child born of the woman ends up ruling with an iron rod and ends up being the Antichrist. And then, so on and so forth. Howard, you want to put a pin on that? And then we'll...
I just wanted to say that when she's saying about an institution, young people.
Yeah.
Most young people I talk to, if they've not gone to church, why? You know what they say?
What?
Boring.
It's boring?
So it comes down to the singer that, there.
I think there's a movement of kids thinking that they don't have to go to church.
That's what we need.
Yeah, there is also a movement of people that think I can be spiritual without going to. It's back to the institutional question, right? I went through that phase. I did. Like, I don't have to go to church to be spiritual. It's between me and God, and me and Jesus, whatever. It's a really short-sighted me version, which is understandable given the individuality, rampant autonomy and individuality that is killing people these days. I have the right to be happy and you can't get in my way, so I can tell you what you have to do in order for me to feel safe and happy and secure, et cetera, et cetera. It's always somebody else's fault. And there's this autonomy that it's me. So how dare you tell me that I have to go to church? Well, so my invitation of that is always, can you forgive your own sins? Can you scratch your own back? And if you think it is a value to be encouraging of your brothers and sisters in the faith, then why don't you? So I've actually told somebody before, I don't really want to go to church because I think it's boring. And I said, I don't care. Well, I feel like I don't get anything. I said, I don't care how you feel. What about the people in the next pew over? Now, this was just that particular application. The people in the next pew over are really encouraged to see you there. And because they've had a rough week, and when they look around and they feel beaten up and they don't see any young people, they get more discouraged because they feel like their entire life and worldview is just collapsing all around them and they're going to die alone. So when you go to church, even if you sit there and don't get anything out of it, somebody else does. And doesn't that make you feel good to help somebody else? I mean, we could talk about this till we're blue in the face, but I agree. I said when I got here, I still believe this. I've always believed this. If I expect every Christian to go to church every Sunday, then you have a right to expect your preacher to give them something worth listening to. Yeah, I don't know what that means. I'm spiritual. I mean, it's kind of one of those words like, I don't know. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. like pornography, right? Who was that guy that said that? I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. Yeah, yes. Okay, well, then we've come full circle now. Okay, let me just give you one more note, and then I'm going to go back to be encouraged in worship. So there's this word. All of this was done. This is why it was so confusing. Let me just tip my hand, peer behind the curtain a little bit. I wrote my master's thesis on the word hour, H-O-U-R. In Greek, it's hora, in the Gospel of John, which shows up 22 times, and it shows up in chapter 19. So my mind just went back there. I'm like, ooh, I haven't dove in this pool in a while. So when it was really confusing in the beginning, that's because I was trying to distill like 90 pages of information into 5 minutes of Bible study. Suffice to say, in chapter 2, you have the wedding at Cana and the mother of Jesus, and you have, woman, what is it to do with me? I think it's 2:4, it might be 2:6. Woman, what is it to do with me? My hour has not yet come. So you have the character of the mother of Jesus in chapter 2 saying, here it's time for the wedding banquet. It's time for the feast. It's time for the new wine in new wineskins, the church. And Jesus says, my hour has not yet come. The mother doesn't show up again until chapter 19 when his hour has come. Knowing that his hour was near, he loved them to the last, chapter 13, verse 1. In that hour, Jesus was crucified. 19, verse 14, it was the 6th hour when Pilate brought him out, which, by the way, was 6 o'clock, not noon, like in the other Gospels. But I digress. So finally, his hour has come. The hour of Jesus is the hour of his suffering and death. That is his glory in the Gospel of John. And then you confer chapter 16, where he talks about the pregnant woman. Her hour has come and she is in sorrow. So the disciples are in sorrow. Mary is in sorrow. The church is in sorrow. We're sorrowful standing next to the cross of Jesus Christ. But that is the fulfillment of his mission of salvation. And then he says, it is finished. Tetelestai, one word in Greek. It is finished. And he bowed his head and he gave up his spirit to the Father. So then we go to the tomb and we find it empty, and he comes to us and he gives us peace, life, and hope. And so the hour has come, and the hour is still yet to come when he comes again in glory. Whew. Oh, I passed. Yeah, you get that I, they don't give you a grade. They just say, yeah, good work. Okay. Well, I'm sorry if I offended anybody today, but not yet. Oh, the day is young. I can find. I'm always finding new and unique ways to offend people. It's my curse. We're going to Ann Arbor today because my wife is receiving her. It's finally her commencement. She received her master's in curriculum and instruction in 2020. And for some reason, I can't remember why, but they canceled the ceremony like 3 times. So they're finally doing it. So we finally get to go. And we're going to go, and then we're going to take and then we're going to, we're clapping for her. The ice is clapping. Yeah. So yeah, for a while, she's like, I don't know, should we go? Should we take the kids? Whatever. I'm like, what are you, nuts? You got this degree. You worked very hard on it. You paid a lot of money for it. You did a great job. You finished it, and you were robbed of your celebration. Yes, we're going. She's like, yeah, but all the kids too. I'm like, yes, we will go, and we will sit there, and I will threaten them, and they will be quiet. And then we will go out to Red Robin and have cheeseburgers. Okay. So that's where we're going. So you won't find me immediately after church because I got to hightail it home and head down there. So. That's all. We will see you, if I don't see you on Tuesday, I hope to see you Wednesday at one of the song services. And then one of the other 19 services we're doing this week. So the love of God, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be and abide with you always. Amen.